I believe 2024 will be Ashes of Creation's most important year yet, and I think on some levels it might even be make or break for the MMO. Now, I may have some personal concerns with this game, but oddly it's one of the most exciting games coming next year, and that's very strange because it's not actually properly releasing. Ashes of Creation Alpha 2 will be happening in Q3 in 2024, and I think this alpha is very important for several reasons, and I think it's a truly pivotal year. So let me explain why. Ashes of Creation is one of the internet's darling MMOs. It is incredibly hyped and many people are looking forward to it. The only MMO with perhaps even more hype and even less game is the Riot MMO. Now, if you don't know, Ashes of Creation is being made by Intrepid Studios and it's being forefronted by Steven Sharif. It's a passion project turned AAA MMO hopeful. And the interest in the game is from all over the MMO community hemisphere. And I think for good reason. Ashes of Creation is an old school MMO being made with a no compromise mentality. And that's in part due to how the game is funded. It's mostly some self-funding, Kickstarter, and some online pledges. The game's not being controlled by executives who only care about money. Bobby Kotick. Now, will this translate into an amazing MMO? Well, simply put right now, we just don't know. But I suspect 2024 will reveal some of the answers. The recently announced Alpha 2 release date means we're going to see a lot of what to expect when the MMO actually is finally released, if it finally gets there. As Steven said himself, Alpha 2 is intended to be a true functional representation of all core systems and features. And honestly, the core features that the game is going to offer are very exciting. There's going to be a huge open world to explore. We're going to have seasons, the character creator, world events, several player class archetypes, reworked combat, sieges, naval content, crafting systems, and the incredibly important node system, and much more on top of that. All of this is going to be playable in Alpha 2, and a lot of people will be making commentary on it. Asmon, Force Gaming, Lazy Peon, etc, etc. And this means that a lot of opinions and first impressions will be made and spread across the internet. And I think this does highlight one of the problems with the game's open development. Intrepid have been sharing monthly updates live on Twitch and then in video form on YouTube, and the progress is pretty much mostly revealed as they go along. They do keep some things hidden, of course. And most of their tests, the major tests, are going to be NDA free. For example, Alpha 1 main test was NDA free, and currently they are doing some behind the scenes NDA testing of Alpha 2, but eventually the Alpha 2 will have a proper non-NDA release, if that makes sense. But I think as much as Intrepid will tell people that this is simply an alpha state and everything is subject to change, I do think there will be some people that make lasting impressions of the game because of Alpha 2, and even though I do suspect that most sensible people can differentiate and understand that an alpha version of the game will not necessarily fully reflect the released product, I think because of the full content being on offer here, the full systems being available, I think the opinions will be a little bit more cemented than Intrepid would maybe like. Now, this can go a couple of different ways. It might be that Alpha 2 is simply exceptional, beloved by all and with no detractors. Or it could be the opposite of that. Maybe some of the systems don't work. Maybe people start to think, oh, it's actually an old school MMO and I'm in a modern era. Maybe I've moved on. We don't know how the response will be because it's not coming yet. For me, there's a couple of key game features that have to be interesting and they have to add value when we do get the Alpha 2. And if they don't, then the Alpha 2 might not be a success. So one key thing that they have to get right is the combat. Now, they have made many changes since the Alpha 1 test. The improvements look significantly better. The Alpha 1 test seemed to have very rigid combat with no split body movement, and quite frankly, it looked a little bit awkward. And now in the update videos, the combat does look way more fluid and way more engaging. Now, it is going to feature a action combat-like mode as well as traditional tab target. Now, I'm not going to go into super high details what this combat is, because everything is subject to change, of course, but tab target is pretty much what you would expect. I believe they are intending to have a weapon-based combo system instead of the traditional auto attack. They are also planning an active block as well as being able to dodge, which already for me makes it more interesting than a lot of the other tab target MMOs that are available. And the hybrid mode basically means that your cursor and your aim are one, and you actually have to vaguely look in the enemy's direction to select them. But it will sort of then lock on and other than skill shots, you will be guaranteed to hit, which is fine. My main concern with that is if tab targeting is just more effective and more efficient and more competitive, then people will just use that. But I don't think it's true action combat in that sense, but hopefully it's going to be fun tab target combat. And it needs to be fun because combat is what you spend a lot of your game actually doing in an MMO. So this needs to be much better. It doesn't have to be perfect yet because there's a long way to go, but it has to be at least on the right track. Now with combat, I've mentioned a couple of times that I have a preference sort of for more action-based combat. I did personally try Season of Discovery and Throne of Liberty lately, and I sort of found the combat a little bit dated. Now at the moment, I don't think the MMO audience have necessarily made that shift. I think actually in the main, there is a massive audience for tab target MMOs, and the more popular MMOs out there sort of prove that. But I think at some point there might be a seismic shift coming to the MMO genre, but I don't think we're going to see that for a couple of years yet, partly for tech reasons and partly for risk reasons. I'll not talk about that too much here, but I do think that Ashes of Creation might be the last great tab target MMO, if they do it right. One thing I will say with the combat is when I did see it, there was a lot of spell effects, but I think the community sort of reacted to that, and I think they started toning them down a little bit, because it was a little bit hard to see what was actually going on. Overall, I'm pretty confident that the combat will be better. Hopefully it's good enough, because as I said, it's very important. Another thing that they need to get right, because it's going to be of massive interest to the players, is the node system. It's a vast system that I'm not going to fully explain here, but there are areas with nodes in them, and then these nodes can level up from small villages to big cities, and this can change the world in significant ways. This is one of the main drivers for the PvP sieges and the politics on the server, and it has to be interesting. My worry with this system is that it simply doesn't affect the game that much on a day-to-day, gameplay-to-gameplay session basis. Maybe the quests will differ a little bit, but are they all going to be interesting? Does one area having a city in one node versus another server with a city in a different node change the game in significant ways? Because if it doesn't, it could just be a pointless complication. Now, obviously this is going to be an alpha test, but for me, it's a key feature of the game that has to look like it will be purposeful, fun, and have value. Now, I did mention that this will be a driver for some of the sieges. I think that this is one key feature, but I don't think they have to nail this in Alpha 2 straight out of the gate. Because if there's a little bit of lag here, I think that's fine. I'm not necessarily expecting full network optimization. Anything that is vaguely passable here, I think might end up being pretty impressive. And it did seem okay in the previous alphas, so I'm not expecting anything disastrous here. Now, I know that there's more features than that, but I think that those features are key to the Ashes of Creation hype train. If those features are bad or just plain underwhelming, then the whole reputation of the game might come crashing down. People might start asking, why bother? Now, Ashes of Creation is one of the most anticipated MMOs, and I think unfortunately no matter what happens, it can't possibly be as big or as good as so many people think and expect. The mystery and the uncertainty makes people think that the game might be for them, but we know that the game is not going to be for everyone. However, I think everybody thinks it is for them right now. And when we get the Alpha 2, I think there is a real risk that the number of people interested might start to dwindle as reality sets in. I think that there are a couple of key features that Intrepid are planning with the game that might make it not as suitable for the wider MMO audience. Let me just give a couple of examples. I think open world PvP might be a deal breaker for many. Being able to be PvP killed anywhere will be difficult to balance. It does sound fun to fight somebody if they're in your favourite farming spot, but it won't seem fun to be griefed and killed repeatedly. The PvP corruption-like system is an unknown entity at the moment in terms of how it will be actually balanced. If the system is too weak, then the non-PvP minded players will not be interested in the game. They don't want to be killed randomly all the time. But if the system is too harsh, then the PvPers might be a little bit annoyed. If the PvPers can't PvP, they might find it underwhelming. I think PvP is just one example where when the reality sets in, a large group of people might find that the game is not for them. And to paraphrase the devs, that's alright. Another thing that might sort of indicate that this won't be for everybody, if you consider the amount of time that they are planning for you to get to max level, it's estimated to take around 45 days if you play 5 hours a day. That's over 200 hours. Now I think it's quite clear that that might not be the most casual friendly MMO. Now that's obviously premature, because a lot of people find the leveling fun. I'm just worried that they won't cater to this casual audience, and that might mean that the game is actually very niche. Right now, Ashes of Creation is very sought after, but it's very possible that this hype bubble will just pop. Or it might be the case that there is a large group of people who are ready for a hardcore MMO, and maybe they don't enjoy the current big MMOs because they're just not being catered to. But one thing I think will happen is Ashes of Creation's Alpha 2 will start giving us some of the answers to these questions. But for now, it's just something we need to consider. The Alpha 2 server, by the way, is expected to stay live right up until the game actually releasing, even through the various beta tests. The idea here is that it'll be more of a technical test for a more niche group of players to actually try out. And I think that's in line with how the game is currently being sold. It does sort of make sense. To play the Alpha 2, you actually need to spend $250 before January 17th, 2024. But I would recommend that most normal players just do not do that. Only consider that if you want to actually test an unfinished MMO and try and make it better. Otherwise, if you want to get in early, I would consider some of the other packages, which include Beta 1 and Beta 2. I think the sale of those is also stopping, but I'm not 100% sure as I record this. So in general, whilst I do have some concerns about Ashes of Creation and the deliverance on such a huge hype train, I am personally very happy to ride this train to wherever it is going. Is it going to be that diamond in the rough that actually caters to that mass audience that isn't being catered to? Or is it going to be way more niche than people currently expect? I do think that Alpha 2 will give us some very strong hints about that. For me, 2024 will be very exciting with Ashes of Creation almost no matter what. I do truly hope that it's an MMO that we can all embrace, because we are all just nerds hoping for a very good MMO. I'm excited, but it comes with a little bit of caution, and I think that's reasonable and sensible. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Big shout out to my Patreons. If you want to support me, that's the best way to do it. If you want to come and talk to me about anything, then come and talk to me over on Twitch. For now, have a most beautiful day, like and subscribe. Goodbye.